microphones and center aisles.
While folks are coming up, if anyone is interested more about regulatory science at the, in medical devices at the FDA, there's a truly fascinating book that you can read. It's up on our website, by the way. If you just search for regulatory science, it lists the various projects that we are engaged in and very short descriptions of what they're about. And you'll see that we are engaged in dozens of different projects across many different technologies and many different disciplines.
Yes. Susan Albert, thanks, Jeff. I think it was very informative for all of us to hear the kinds of things that you are doing at the center and the science that's being applied in-house. I think my question would be, you've now had a couple of visits here to Minnesota. You've seen large companies, small companies, had a chance to see through Life Science Alley the kinds of things that this area of the country can provide. Have you thought about what's the specific area that which we should work on first? Is there a particular medical area or technology type that you think might be a good first step for evaluating the work that this MOU can accomplish?
Well, it's a great question. I mean, ultimately, we'd like to hear from industry where industry thinks initial attention should be focused. But I'll tell you, in the conversations we've been having, computer modeling in the cardiovascular or the orthopedic space, or even some of the modeling in the medical imaging space has gotten a lot of attention and interest. And this is a chance where either we could be looking at models already developed, and then, if you will, sort of choosing which is the best one for use, or developing models that actually don't exist today and where we see a great need. Our hope being that rather than 20 companies all developing their own models, coming to us hoping to get validation, I'll tell you, taking a long time to get there, is why not pool that effort so we're all developing one method and a very good method that we validate and all can use.
Dr. Sharon Jim Cassidy, how do you see FDA's initiative in the regulatory science space interfacing with the efforts already underway of global harmonization of standards in this area?
So we see the work being done here in regulatory science as being fed into standards development. In fact, 25% of my staff's time is devoted, on average, is devoted to standards development. We're engaged in over 120 different standard development organizations, and we think it's so critical that the science that's developed is fed into those efforts. We're not looking to be duplicative, we're actually looking to be complementary. And I will also preface to say, this is not FDA developing all these tools. This is not about dollars coming to FDA. This is about pooling resources for either experts in industry, experts in academia, or jointly for doing the work. And in some cases, happy to leverage the FDA expertise. But ultimately, our biggest role is then in validation, and all of this then being fed for standards development. And lastly, if we develop it, though, we can adopt it immediately and use it for FDA purposes, and then feed it into other ongoing efforts for international standards.
Hi, Chad Monroe, I'm CEO of Halifax Biomedical. We're a measurements company and we help support clinical trials. And my question is, if we have a new measure that's very promising for evaluating a certain condition like spinal fusion or the state of spinal fusion, but it's a very new measure, what's our first step in bringing that forward? Is it working with an industry partner to show strong data, or do we work with your organization to develop and validate this test?
Well, again, great question. You know, in the absence of this kind of a forum, oftentimes then companies are coming to us with that test methodology to say, is this going to be good enough for the FDA's purposes? Here's where the FDA falls down, and we're looking to address this. In fact, we'd like to be doing this with industry, which is laying out what are the broad criteria for validation and the process for validation, and then tailoring that as needed for different tools that we would have to validate or qualify. And we see the other benefit out of this kind of a public-private partnership is a much more transparent and robust way for validating the new tools that are developed. And that, too, saves time, and it provides greater assurances, we think, more quickly and at lower cost.
Hello, Dr. Shuren, Mac McKean. Say you've identified the stakeholders and the regulatory science initiative. How does the reviewer fit into this, and how does this information translate and trickle down to them?
So our folks who are in the laboratories, our Office of Science and Engineering Laboratories, spend about 50% of their time on this regulatory science work and 50% of the time in pre-market review. Our pre-market review offices, our Office of Device Evaluation, our Office of In Vitro Diagnostics, are where you could think about are the experts on products. The folks in our labs are experts in a variety of different scientific disciplines. And they bring in what's happening in the regulatory science space into the pre-market reviews and with the reviewers. But that said, a number of these efforts on regulatory science are also being engaged in by our reviewers directly. So in either developing test methods, in assessing test methods, or in the standards development on the national and international level.
Dr. Shuren, Steve Mertens, first of all, thank you for providing the leadership on signing the MOU. I was wondering, as you look with your experience on the drug side, what are some of the symptoms of success, measures you'll be looking for to see if we're making sufficient progress? And also, how long do you think it'll take for this to mature on the medical device side?
I think one of the elements of success here has been trust. You know, the drug industry early on looked at each other and said, we're competitors. What do you mean work together? And over time, you know, through a series of investments and projects, they began to realize that you can do work in this pre-competitive space, particularly if you have a place where you can share information and resources and assure that if there's something proprietary, and by proprietary I mean the tool or the data that was behind assessing a tool or a product, isn't shared with the competitor. So one early sign of success is that we actually get people to the table to engage in the effort. But the second is that we are putting out test methods, validated test methods, that truly affect the time and the cost and the quality of the data generated in device development and assessment. That, to us, will be true success, because right now, these are one-off efforts that, to get underway, is extremely resource-intensive. The idea of the partnership is you've already taken care of that infrastructure side, so that the time and the cost to get from idea to instituting the project is significantly compressed. That's what happens, and it's happened on the drug side. We think it can happen here. When? I think we can actually be doing some of those initial pilot tests in 2012 and probably lay the foundation and begin to set up a true partnership this year as well. In fact, I'll foreshadow our center is going to be releasing our strategic priorities for 2012, and it will be the big ticket things that we will work on. Setting up that partnership I talked about and having it up and running by the end of 2012 is one of the goals we're going to publicly commit to do. And it may actually be starting right here today. Well, again, thank you very much for the chance to come here. Appreciate it.
Okay. Well, thank you, Dr. Shuren. We are, like I said before, we're absolutely delighted to have you here. I'd also like to ask if in the back, I see Steve and Donna are talking to each other. I'd like to ask the two of Dr. Shuren's colleagues to please stand up. We have Dr. Pollack and Donna Lochner. I think Steve I think Steve and Donna and also Dr. Shuren will be able to stay around for a little bit before they have to catch an airplane. So please, if you have any questions, please feel free to stop and ask them. Before we close, I want to just say that we really appreciate your attendance here today and for choosing to work with us and partner with us and our academic leaders to initiate a new approach to regulatory science. And we would now invite all of you who are here to stay for the closing reception and some great networking that's going to be going on. But before I close that out and let you go, I want to say a couple things. There are a lot of people in this state who are doing a lot to try to help this industry be successful. Our private sector leadership, people like Steve Mertens, who was the chairman of the board for LifeScience Alley, and Bill McCormick, who is the chairman of the board for the BioBusiness Alliance, and all of the board members that are here. You don't have a sense when you're out there of how much time and effort they put in trying to make this work. We also have our local government leadership. I notice there are several legislators here today that have played a very instrumental role for us in helping to advance our industry and create policies that work. We have our academic leadership. We have just a whole bunch of people that come together in a very unusual manner to create an environment that works. So I think that Dr. Shuren and his staff have experienced that to some degree while they've been visiting us. I see Steve nodding his head. I take that as an affirmative. But for us, and for me personally, who've been involved in this for 30 years now, it's a great source of pride. So with that, I want to close. I want to thank you for being here. We have plenty of hors d'oeuvres and drink options, and we will be back right at 5 o'clock sharp with the business card drawing for your chance to win some great prizes, so please stay tuned. And before you get up and leave to go back and then be prepared for the drawing at 5 o'clock, I'd like to make sure that the board members for LifeScience Alley and the BioBusiness Alliance stay back because we're going to have a photo op here with Dr. Shuren. So with that, one more round of applause for Dr. Shuren and his effort. Thank you. So thank you all.